Hey everybody, Aaron Herman of the Open Scroll here, and to our faithful Open Scrollers, good to be back with you as always. And if you're just tuning in for the first time, welcome. It's good to have you. And also Shabbat Shalom, because today is Saturday, May 16th, and it is the 22nd day of the second month on the Lord's calendar. And I'm here with Bob Schlenker.
Hi everybody. Today the focus is on the subject of Revelation 13, which has to do with two beasts and the mark of the beast. There's a lot of speculation and confusion and not a lot of grounding in what the Lord has revealed already. So I'm going to touch on some of that and show you this presentation. I've updated Revelation 13, and we're going to go through that in some detail. And what you're going to find is that if this kind of thing is new to you, the language of the Bible is highly structured, very highly organized. And so this is how it is with the ways of God. And his schedule is no less well organized. And because of this, we have a very strong conviction that time is going to be reset into the past and that the Lord has promised this. And we find that there's not a lot of people who've gotten on board with that, and there won't be. This is not something that's going to really factor in to the great scheme of things as far as recognition goes, widespread recognition, until after time has been reset and the Lord's purposes are well underway of being accomplished. In this season, we're going to show you that what's going on right now is not the mark, but it's a predecessor to the mark. It's preliminary, antecedent. It's part of the setup, but these things will not go through to fulfillment until after time has been reset, because there is an order to things. It's all highly structured, and the Lord is not going to abandon it. This is actually prophetic truth that we're looking at. So when we consider Revelation 13, there are some comments that I've made and embedded into this study that I'm going to read. Then we're going to go through the elements of this structure, and you're going to see some things that you may not have seen before, because when you've analyzed the structure and you see how it all fits together, insights open up. When I click on this bar up here, I get this comment window. Aaron, would you read the first paragraph for us, please?
Chapter 13 is about two beasts that are given the authority of the dragon. One beast is seen coming out of the sea, and the other out of the earth or land. Naturally speaking, the boundary between the sea and the land is the shore, and this is where the dragon stands. The positioning speaks on the symbolic or esoteric level of a fundamental duality. It has to do with space and time, the material and spiritual, and the temporal and eternal realms.
And if you want to read more, I recommend that you do. Recommend that you load this page up as you're watching this video and take advantage of your pause button and take advantage of whatever screen real estate you've got available. It's not really designed for a cell phone, but if that's all you've got, well, okay. Now, on this long bar, I've got this little window. Aaron, could you read this one for us, please?
The thematic structure of the account of the first beast in 13:1b through 10 is very closely repeated in the account of the second, which is 13 verses 11 through 18. These companion texts reveal how closely the two beasts compare in important ways. Excluding the opening line, the design of this entire chapter is an 11 by 11 parallelism.
And what that means to those of you who are new to this is that the structure is broken out so that there are 11 sections that match 11 sections. And when it's repeated in order. That's why it's called a parallelism. If it was in inverse order in the repetition, it would be called a chiasm, which is named after the letter X, which crosses over. So what I'm going to do is change the zoom on this so we get the whole thing on screen. And you can see that there's a lot of lines that are broken up differently than they are in your text of the Bible. And the reason why is because this is how it naturally divides. And this part in the dark blue is basically repeated in the part that's in the lighter blue. And it's section by section. So as I hover over these, I know you won't be able to read them very well because it's small, but the point is I want to show you how they compare. And so we've got the two highlighted here, and these would be in technical terms, the A and A prime components of this structure. So there's one, and as I hover my mouse down, we see the highlighting of the second, of the third, and you'll notice that in this third set, these are the only ones where they're both expanded. Up on top is expanded with many lines, and on the bottom it's also expanded with many lines. One of the things that you'll see in the way this structure works is the things that are said in each of these items about the first beast are repeated with the second. It's repeated in the structure and thematically. There are comparisons that really beg being made. Here's the fourth set, fifth, sixth, seventh, eighth, ninth, 10th, and 11th. So we're going to go through those. I'm going to zoom in so we can read this better. And I've got a lot of commentary plugged in on this line, and I saw a beast coming out of the sea, and I'm just going to read this one part. On the metaphor of water as time, and where the sea represents the place of the dead, the implication is that the beast seen coming out of the sea will appear to come out of time itself as the reappearance of one who had been long dead, like Osiris, Horus, or Apollo. From what's revealed in Revelation 17, where the 7 heads are mountains and kings, and the 10 crowns are also kings, this beast will manifest on several levels. Now I've got Revelation 17, the text of that right here, and you'll notice that there's a lot that's in common between Revelation 13 and 17. So as you're reading and getting familiar with the text, I recommend you go through chapter 17 as well. Now, before we really go through each individual item, I want to point out that the mark only comes into play down here at the end. And notice there's a lot that goes on before then. And so in the context, these things in our world today have not happened. And this will be very apparent. And so for the mark of the beast to be legitimate, it has to follow in this context as it's described with details. So you want to be attentive to the details, and this will give you some comfort, and it will also clarify for you some of the things that other people are saying. It'll reveal them to be false claims, because a lot of people are ignorant about what the Bible really says about the mark of the beast. Now, one of the fundamentals, if you're new to the open scroll, you've got a lot of catching up to do. Whenever we talk about the beast and his mark, and when the beast is coming forth onto the world stage, you've got to understand that there's going to be a baptism that takes place. Antichrist is kind of a counterfeit to Christ, and a counterfeit is very close to the genuine. And so the pattern of the things that we're seeing with the genuine like when Jesus was baptized by John in the River Jordan. There's going to be something comparable with the Antichrist. And this takes place in a certain time, in a certain way. And this passage from 2 Thessalonians 2, I have a lot of history with that. And this is where the Lord first led me to begin to explore the thematic structure. And you can read about that, like I say, in this comment down here in the study, The Sign for the Bride, Part 1. And you'll find that in the context, that article is right here, and that's on our sitemap or content guide. And it's in the context of the hope, when cometh that thief in the night. And there's quite a few studies in there that are basically supporting what's written in here. These are long studies, they're very deep, but I can tell you, people find this very worthwhile because you're not going to find this information elsewhere. This is not traditional teaching. We haven't learned this from a seminary. We haven't made it up in a whimsical fashion. This is something that the Lord has brought through a lot of effort, through many years, and he's used other people in their works to kind of point the way at times or to validate at times. So with all that said, here we are back in Revelation 13. I saw a beast coming out of the sea, and in the light blue down below. Then I saw another beast coming out of the earth. And so here we have the introductory line identifying some key feature about these beasts. And of course, this language is really cryptic, and a lot of people have claimed to have complete revelation insight. Strangely, though, they all seem to contradict each other. I don't buy it. I myself will not claim to have revelation insight about what all the details mean at this point. I just take what I have and I'm going with it. The time is coming when the Lord is going to open all this up as it unfolds. But so far, that has not been the case. About the first beast, he had 10 horns, and down below we see the second beast has 2 horns. And this is obviously a matchup. We're talking about comparisons with attributes, with animals. Now we get to this third set, and I'm going to collapse a little bit here so we bring them up easily into the same view. Now in this third set, we've got several lines in each and a little bit more complicated structure. Obviously, most of the content is here. So let's talk about the comparison between the two a little bit. We've got in red, the fatal wound had been healed. And that's one of the common subjects between these two. And we're also talking about authority and the exercise of authority. And I haven't highlighted those words, but as you read through, that should be really obvious. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through the individual structures of one and then the other sections. So when I hover my mouse over this bar spanning these 4 lines, you'll see that it turns dark blue in the shading, and then comparing to that in the bar down below, that span is in light blue, and then down below it's in green. And what I'm saying is that there's basically a primary or local level of correspondence in the blue. But in the green, I'm calling attention to another kind of a secondary correspondence. So hovering over this bar, I'm saying that the one corresponds to the other in a primary way. Now, when I hover over this bar, it's very specific. And If it was a line by line comparison, I would also highlight the lines, but you'll see I have no line by line comparison between these sections. Aaron, would you read these two from the dark blue and then the green?
The dragon gave the beast his power and his throne and great authority. One of the heads of the beast seemed to have had a fatal wound, but the fatal wound had been healed. The whole world was astonished and followed the beast. And down below, he exercised all the authority of the first beast on his behalf, and made the earth and its inhabitants worship the first beast, whose fatal wound had been healed.
Pretty obvious how they match up. And if you compare these sections, you'll find the same thing. And Aaron, I'd like you to read again what's in the dark blue and then what's in the green.
Men worshipped the dragon because he had given authority to the beast. And they also worshipped the beast and asked, "Who is like the beast? Who can make war against him?" Down below, and he performed great and miraculous signs, even causing fire to come down from heaven to earth in full view of men. Because of the signs he was given power to do on behalf of the first beast, he deceived the inhabitants of the earth. He ordered them to set up an image in honor of the beast, who was wounded by the sword and yet lived.
Right. Now, when it says here that he orders them to set up an image in honor of the beast, what he's talking about is what we see up above, this worship of the beast. See how that works? So the primary correspondence, though, is up here at the top. So I'm saying that this part in the dark blue is repeated in the lighter blue. And how so? It's in order. It's another parallelism. The dragon gave the beast his power and his throne and great authority. Men worshiped the dragon because he had given authority to the beast. Couldn't be more obvious. Now, I'm not going to read the commentary on this line or these other lines, but I invite you to do so. So this beast, one of the heads of the beast seemed to have a fatal wound. And it says, and they also worship the beast. And you may ask, well, how does that correspond? Well, not every time things are paired, is there an obvious meaning? Sometimes it's more profound. But as I've done the study, I continue to come up with the fact that, yep, these really are aligned. And there is some insight to be had as you give this consideration. Next line, but the fatal wound had been healed, and asked, who is like the beast? And again, not obvious. The whole world was astonished and followed the beast. Who can make war against him? And again, there is a correspondence there that's not obvious. Now, as I go down to the next section here, we're going to find that the structure is first, on this first level, where verse 12 is repeated in verses 13 and 14, it's another parallelism. And so I've made a bar here that corresponds with this bar to show that they're the same, and we've got another 4 parts there. And you'll notice that I've left a highlighting on between this line, which is the last line, and these others up here. So with these lines of 13 and 14a and b, there's yet another parallelism structure. And I'm going to start there, and then I'm going to work back up to this one and work our way down. So verse 13, and he performed great and miraculous signs because of the signs, even causing fire to come down from heaven to earth in full view of men. He was given power to do on behalf of the first beast. So with regard to the signs, that's pretty obvious. And why do I divide it out into these? Because these lines are descriptive about what's happening with regard to the signs. And it really has to do with the power. And he is a magician. Let's call it what it is. He's a magician. And this beast will probably have a scepter or a staff as a magic wand in order to perform his feats. And these are deceptive, as you can see. And that is their point. They're demonstrating real power, and people will be impressed with it. But it's going to be towards the promotion of lies. So we see this corresponding to the first line of verse 12. He exercised all the authority of the first beast on his behalf. And that's what's going on here. Given power to do on behalf of the first beast, right? And this is the exercise of authority. And so in this next pairing, and made the earth and its inhabitants, he deceived the inhabitants of the earth. That's pretty obvious. Worship the first beast. He ordered them to set up an image in honor of the beast. That's worship. Whose fatal wound had been healed, who was wounded by the sword and yet lived. So these correspondences in the 4x4 or 4+4 parallelism are really pretty obvious. So that wraps up our consideration of the third set here. I'm going to collapse this to bring the others right up on screen better. So having covered this one, we're now going to cover the fourth one in the series. And Aaron, I'd like you to read the parts that's in dark blue and then in the lighter blue down below.
The beast was given a mouth to utter proud words and blasphemies, and to exercise his authority for 42 months. He opened his mouth to blaspheme God and to slander his name and his dwelling place and those who live in heaven. He was given power to make war against the saints. Down below, he was given power to give breath to the image of the first beast so that it could speak.
So there's a pretty easily noted correspondence between these sections, and I've highlighted in the colors to draw attention to some of the more obvious bits. Now it's expanded up here with the first beast. This part, verse 5, is repeated in 6 and 7a. How so? Again, it's a parallelism, a very consistent structural design. The beast was given a mouth to utter proud words and blasphemies. He opened his mouth to blaspheme God and to slander his name and his dwelling place and those who live in heaven. That's a pretty obvious matchup. And to exercise his authority for 42 months, he was given power to make war against the saints. Again, that's pretty obvious, the exercise of authority that he receives and how long he's got it and what he's going to do with it. And there will be saints, not all the saints, because as you'll see if you take a good look at 2 Thessalonians 2, verses 1 through 12, you'll see that the sign for the bride is when the beast is revealed, when he's baptized, and it reveals him. And at that point, it's a sign that the bride will be taken up in a harvest event, a resurrection event, you could say, as the barley harvest. She'll be taken up about a week later at the end of the feast. So what we have is that some of the church will already have been taken, transformed, and at least some of them will have a further role in the earth. But the way things unfold, great persecution will break out, and many of the saints will be slain, but not all. but there will still be saints. So those who are remaining at this time will be they won't be exempt like saints in the past who have suffered as martyrs and been persecuted, and as we are likely about to be. The devil does have power. You can't just rebuke him and say, you have no power over me. There are times when the Lord allows his saints to be subjected to horrible things. And this is the case here. And the next set, and to conquer them, and cause all who refuse to worship the image to be killed. That sounds like conquering them, doesn't it? Those who refuse to worship the image. Who's going to do that? Nobody in their right minds, unless they're the saints, right? We're going to want to resist and will resist. And then in this set, and he was given authority over, he also forced. Easy comparison. And the categories are given, and there's 4 in each set. Every tribe, people, language, and nation, everyone, small and great, rich and poor, free and slave. Aaron, do you see any exemptions in there?
I see no exemptions, sir. That pretty much covers everyone.
Yeah. So he's given power to make war against the saints and conquer them, and he's given authority over every tribe, people, language, and nation. And then when the second beast comes around, acting in the power of the first beast, he's going to force everyone to do something. And here's an interesting correspondence right here. All inhabitants of the earth will worship the beast. And paired with that, to receive a mark on his right hand or on his forehead. This is the implementation of the mark, right? And the second beast forces it. And what does this mark have to do with? It has to do with worshiping the beast. Worshiping the beast whose image was made. Right? Have we seen that yet in our day? No. Are we expecting to see that? Well, we're going to come to the brink of the revealing of the lawless one. The brink of his doing his work of betrayal, as Aaron and I pointed out from John 18. But it's not going to go to fulfillment. It's going to be cut off. It's going to be aborted. All whose names have not been written in the book of life, that no one could buy or sell unless he had the mark. And those who have the mark, their names have not been written in the book of life. See how it corresponds? And then the 10th set here, belonging to the Lamb that was slain from the creation of the world, which is the name of the beast or the number of his name. And so we're talking about belonging. We're talking about possession, identification, right? On one hand, there's this, and on one hand, there's that. Opposing. I'll expand this one now. And these are the final of the 11 elements being compared in this chapter. And these are very interesting. Aaron, would you read these for me, please?
He who has an ear, let him hear. If anyone is to go into captivity he will go. If anyone is to be killed with the sword he will be killed. This calls for patient endurance and faithfulness on the part of the saints. And down below, this calls for wisdom. If anyone has insight, let him calculate the number of the beast, for it is man's number. His number is 666.
So I've done some highlighting here in the green, if anyone, and in the fuchsia color, this calls for, and you can see that there's a pretty obvious correspondence between those two sections. So let's talk about the breakdown of this section here. I'm saying this dark blue part is repeated in the lighter blue. And how so on this first level? Look at that. We have a chiasm. That should call attention to it because it's unique, right? We've seen one parallelism after another. That's been the dominating design, but now we have something that stands out, and that's a device that should always get our attention. And so if you've got an ear to hear, that's what this is about, being specially blessed with a hearing ear. And this is something that is developed. We have the opportunity to develop this. I've written about the keys to developing a hearing ear. If you're familiar with that, you know what I'm talking about. If not, well, there's still an opportunity to get on board with some of these things that you may find yourself lacking in. So I encourage you, make the best with the time you've got. Put away your playthings, because this is a time for adults to do adult things. It's a time for us to put on our big boy pants and our big girl dresses and go about the Lord's business with an attitude that is commensurate with the nature of our season. So, he who has an ear, let him hear. Oftentimes in the Gospels, when the Lord says that, he's calling attention to the difference between having an ear that hears and one that doesn't. And he's also really illustrating that he is the one who's able to open ears, making a special provision, because there's something very significant in the immediate context that really needs to be carefully discerned. So there's a style that I want to point out. He who has an ear, let him hear. If anyone is to go into captivity he will go. If anyone is to be killed with the sword he will be killed. You see the style repeating, and there's 3 elements and then a 4th. And so this is actually a keystone-ish kind of a pattern. But it's about the fulfillment here and the result of the opening of the ear and the understanding of these statements that otherwise seem to be kind of absurd, kind of senseless, meaningless in a literal sense. If anyone is to go into captivity, well, of course, they're going to go into captivity because they're going into captivity. Why would he say that? Well, why would he repeat anything in all this thematic, symmetrical structure? Because he has points to make. And with the provision of the hearing ear, there's also going to be a provision, special provision from the Lord himself, who grants such special provision for the going into captivity and for the being killed with the sword. So that's not insignificant. And this calls for patient endurance and faithfulness on the part of the saints. Don't give up hope. Don't abandon the Lord and his people, because he provides, as the testimony of the martyrs affirms through the past thousands of years. Verse 18, this calls for wisdom. And now we have a special provision, right? Special and timely provision. If anyone has insight, let him calculate the number of the beast, for it is man's number. His number is 666. And we've talked at length about what that means. We're seeing 666 resonating in our culture, certainly right now with the Microsoft patent number 060606 and the HR bill that was submitted to the House that's numbered 6666. We've got a lot that's resonating. And I'll mention also Matt Kenseth, who's a NASCAR driver, who was my favorite driver for years. He's actually making a return to NASCAR, and he's going to be driving this Sunday in a race. And where his career ended was with race number 665. Right. Just one more resonating item. And he's going to be driving a Chevrolet, but most notably, he's going to be driving car number 42. 42 being 6 times 6 plus 6. 6 times 6 is 36, plus 6 is 42. That's his car number, resonating with the race number 666. And I wouldn't think that would matter at all, except for now in this time with all the things that are going on. Aaron, you have an observation to make?
I just wanted to point out another connection with Matt Kenseth and the Beast. Matt Kenseth's car number 42, that also lines up with the 42 months that the Beast is given authority.
Absolutely. Thank you. So I want to encourage you to see from Revelation 13 exactly what's going to happen before the mark of the beast is actually viable. But I want you to see also that the things that are happening right now with the threats of testing and vaccinating are significant with regard to preparing people, even spiritually, for what's coming. We hope to have much more to say about that. Well, God bless you, everybody. Bye-bye.